Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis and we will be learning today Mitzvah Hashem, Daf Lamed Hey Amid Beis. First we need to complete Daf Lamed Hey Amid Aleph. We are holding in Siman Kuf Nun Gimel and we pick up today on Lamed Hey Amid Aleph, Siman Kuf Nun Gimel, Sif Gimel. That's what we're up to. 4 lines from the bottom, Sif Gimel. Says the Mechaber. Sefer Torah shenimtza boy tos. If you have a Sefer Torah that has a mistake in it, so it's a puzzle of Sefer Torah. Dinoi kechumashim. The Mechaber says that the halacha of such a Sefer Torah, remember, we have been discussing the different levels of Kedusha that different Dvar Sheba Kedusha have, what's considered to be a Kedusha Chamura, what's considered to be on a higher level of Kedusha, what's considered to be a Kedusha Kala, what's on a lower level of Kedusha. It's very negeya because we need to know if you sell something, what are you allowed to do with that money? So, for example, we spoke yesterday in Sif Beis, if the tzibur sells a Beis HaKnesses, they sell a shul, they could buy an Aron Kodesh, because an Aron Kodesh is on a higher level of Kedusha. If they sell an Aron Kodesh, they're allowed to buy a mantle or a gartel for a Sefer Torah, because that's a higher level of Kedusha. So it's very negeya for us to know what's considered to be on a higher level of Kedusha and what is considered to be on a lower level of Kedusha. So over here in Sif Gimel, the Mechaber is discussing the case of a puzzle of Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah shenimtza by Taurus, we have a Sefer Torah with a mistake in it. Says the Mechaber Dina kechumashim. That would be on the same level of Kedusha as what the Mechaber refers to as chumashim. What are these chumashim? These are the chumashim that the Mechaber already discussed at Sif Beis. That's a sefer from Chamisha Chumshei Torah that's written on klaf, begalila, as a scroll. It's written in Ashuris. It's written the way a Sefer Torah is written. That's what the Mechaber means by a chumash, not a printed chumash that we have nowadays. So again, the Mechaber is saying, if you have a puzzle of Sefer Torah, that's on the level of what he refers to as a chumash. Now the Ramah has a very enigmatic entry over here. The Ramah says, "Va'ayin le'el siman kuf mem gimel sif daled." Well, if we go back to siman kuf mem gimel sif daled, we'll see over there the halacha is discussed. If you don't have a kosher Sefer Torah, can you lane from a puzzle of Sefer Torah with a bracha? Can you call up an oila? Can you call up somebody for an aliyah to a puzzle of Sefer Torah, have him make the brachas of the aliyahs and lane? So Shasat Chak, you don't have a kosher Sefer Torah, this is all that you have. So the Ramah back in Siman Kuf Mem Gimel brought down a Yesh Oimrim. The Ramah said Yesh Oimrim de Yesh Likrois Bay. There is a Yesh Oimrim that says that you could actually lane with a bracha for the tzibur out of a puzzle of Sefer Torah. Now, could you lane for the tzibur with a bracha by using one of what the Mechaber refers to as a chumash? Could you use a Sefer Bereshis that's written on klaf, begalila, in Ashuris with all the dinim of the Sefer Torah? Could you lane from that betzibur with a bracha? No. Nobody holds that you can lane betzibur with a bracha from such a chumash. Therefore, it's apparent from this Yesh Oimrim that this Yesh Oimrim brought down by the Ramah and Siman Kuf Mem Gimel would argue on the Mechaber over here. The Mechaber over here is saying that a puzzle of Sefer Torah only possesses the level of Kedusha of a Chumash. Says the Ramah, Ayin Le'el Siman Kuf Mem Gimel Sif Daled, where you'll see that I brought down a Yesh Oimrim that holds that b'shasat chak you could actually lane with a bracha from a puzzle of Sefer Torah. In Cain, the puzzle of Sefer Torah definitely has a higher level of Kedusha than one of these chumashim. So that's why the Ramah is sending us back to Siman Kuf Mem Gimel Sif Daled. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Ches. Dinoi kechumashim. The Mechaber said that the puzzle of Sefer Torah has the same status as one of these chumashim. The Mishnah Berurah explains why. Kevin she'ein kairin by, since you can't lane from the puzzle of Sefer Torah, even though it is something that maybe could be repaired and could be fixed, but the way that Sefer Torah is right now, the Mechaber paskins, you're not allowed to lane from it. If you're not allowed to lane from it, then it has the same status in the context of Kedusha as one of these Chumashim. Now, there is a Noidib Yehuda and a Chasam Sofer that talk about apostle of Sefer Torah. And the Noidib Yehuda, the Chasam Sofer, they say that apostle of Sefer Torah has the same Kedusha invested in it as a kosher Sefer Torah. You can't treat it in any lesser way than you would treat a regular Sefer Torah. Okay, let's move on because we want to cover some ground here. Let's move on to Sif Dalet. Says the Mechaber. A very interesting question. So we're speaking over here about different Dvarim Shepek Kedusha, how much Kedusha they possess, what's on a higher level, what's on a lower level, and what we saw in Sif Beis, and we continued on that theme in Sif Gimel, is we saw that when you go ahead and you sold one davar shebek kedusha, and now you want to use the money for something else, you could elevate it in kedusha, but you cannot demote it in kedusha. So, for example, like we said, you sold a shul, so now you could take the money and you could be malin b'kodesh, you could go up, you could level up in kedusha, and you could use that money to buy an aron kodesh, because an aron kodesh would be a level up. But you can't go ahead and go the other way. You can't go ahead and level down. You can't, let's say, take an Aron Kodesh and sell an Aron Kodesh and use it to buy a shul. That you can't do. But how about if you stay at the same level? Are you allowed to do that? So says the Mechaber here in Sif Dalet. Imuter liknois b'demei kedusha achas. Whether or not it's permissible to use the money on one level of Kedusha and use it to purchase Kedusha Acheres on a different item, a different Davar Shebek Kedusha, Kayotzeba, that's on the same level, Yesh Oisrim, the Yesh Matirim. There are those that say that you're allowed to do this, and there are those that say that you are not allowed to do this. So let's take a look here right away at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cut and test. The Mishnah Berurah says, Kayotzeba, Dahainu, Shamachru Beis HaKnesses Yeshana. Let's say the Tzibur sold an old shul. Veroitze b'damel lika chadasha. Now they have this money. They sold a shul. They have $500,000 from selling a shul. And now what do they want to do? They want to buy a new shul. Veroitze b'damel lika chadasha. V'chein b'chol hadvarim. So now they want to stay at the same level. They sold a shul, they have shul money. Now you want to take the shul money and buy an Aron Kodesh, that you could definitely do. You want to take the shul money and you want to buy a Sefer Torah, that you could definitely do. But could you take the shul money and buy another shul? In that case, you're not leveling up, but you're not leveling down. You're staying exactly at the same level. It's shul money and you want to use it to buy a shul. So over here, the Mechaber said we have a Yesh Oisrim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice Yud Yesh Oisrim. There are those that say you cannot do this. Kevan de'ein malin b'kedusha, because you're not leveling the money a level up. Afal gav de'ein maridin gamkein, even though you're not demoting the money, you're not going down a level in kedusha. But this shita, the Yesh Oisrim, hold that you always have to level up. You sold a shul and now you have shul money. You need to be Mylin B'Kodesh. You want to use that money for something else. You must level it up and you must use it, let's say, for an Aron Kodesh. To stay at the same level, you cannot do that. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, V'dafka b'chol hadvarim sheyochar laha'alois b'kedusha v'chanal. Now, we're only talking about when it's possible to level up. But let's say you have money from a Sefer Torah. By a Sefer Torah, there is no way to go up in a level because the Sefer Torah is the epitome. That's the highest level of Kedusha, so you can't go up. Then everybody would agree that when you sell a Sefer Torah, you use the money to go ahead and purchase another Sefer Torah. Now let's take a look here at the Bir Halacha, Dibur HaMaschil Yesh Oisrim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ayin Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Yud, that's the Mishnah Berurah that we just read. Upashat, says the Chavetz Chaim, it's obvious. The Mairi Sheyesh Lehem Oid Beis HaKnesses Lehispalel. When we say that there's a yesh oisrim, when we say that there's a shita that holds that if you sell a shul, you cannot use the proceeds to purchase another shul because you're staying at the same level and you're required to level up, says the Chavetz Chaim, obviously that's talking about where there is a Beis HaKnesses kavua for the people to daven in. Obviously, we're talking about a case where there is a shul. Because if not, says the Chavetz Chaim, it's certainly more important that you should purchase another Beis HaKnesses so that they should have a Beis HaKnesses kavua to daven in. So again, when we're having this discussion here in Sif Dalet, you sold a shul, are you allowed to buy another shul with that money? Obviously, we're talking about you don't need the money for a shul. If you need the money for a shul, you got to buy a shul so that the people should have a place to daven. We're talking about you don't need the money for a shul. There really is no need to purchase another shul. So then there would be a yesh oisrim that would say you cannot use the money for another shul. Instead, you have to level it up and, let's say, purchase an Aron Kodesh or a Sefer Torah or something on a higher level than the shul. Mishnah Berurah is cutting it aleph v'yesh matirin. There are those that say that you could use the money for something on the same level. Kevan dal kol panim ein moridin mikdushasan, because this shita holds there's only a problem if you go down in kedusha. Malin b'kodesh ve'ein moridin. You have to go up. You're not allowed to go down. But this shita holds that means you don't necessarily have to level up. You could stay at the same level, just you're not allowed to go down. You're not allowed to demote the money in Kedusha. Now, very important, Mishnah Berurah says to Mishnah Berurah, V'chol zeh le'inyan di'evet. Obviously, over here, we're talking about b'di'evet. In other words, if you take a look at the lashon of the Mechaber, im muter liknois b'demei kedusha achas kedusha acheres. The question is, we already have the money. We sold the shul. We already sold the Darish Ebekdusha. Now we have this money and we want to know what we should do with the money. The Cholzel Indian Dievet. Aval Indian Lechatchila, Bevadai also Limkar Shum Davar Kedusha. You're not allowed to sell Lechatchila, a Darish Ebekdusha, Kedei Likach Kiyotzaba. In other words, even the Yesh Matirim, who says that you don't necessarily have to go up in Kedusha, that's b'di'evet when you already made the sale. But if you did not yet sell the Davar Shebekdusha, then, says the Mishnah Berurah, everybody would agree that lechatchila you don't sell a Davar Shebekdusha in order to buy something identical. Even when there's no shash that we have to worry that you'll never replace the thing that you sold. Like the other item is mizumin lefanenu, it's right here in front of us. So in other words, we have a Sefer Torah, and I'm standing by the Sefer with the Sefer Torah, and there's another Sefer Torah right here that's fully kosher and is ready to be delivered to me, and all I have to do is hand over the money, right? And the Sefer maybe is even willing to buy my old Sefer Torah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, lechatchila, you don't go ahead and sell a Sefer Torah in order to just buy another Sefer Torah. Afilu achi aser, because in that case, titzarech lahalois b'kedusha dafka. Lechatchila, you definitely have to level up. Lechatchila, if you want to go ahead and sell a Sefer Torah, it should be with the understanding, well, not a Sefer Torah, because you can't level up with a Sefer Torah, so it's a bad example. But let's say you're going to sell a shul, it should be done lechatchila with the understanding that you're going to take that money and level it up. The question is, b'di'evet, I already sold the shul, now I have the money, b'di'evet, could I use it for something on a similar level of Kedusha? Now, very important, says the Chavetz Chaim, if you see something lacking in the item that you're selling, davar re'ua, a weakness, so let's say you have a Sefer Torah, and the Sefer Torah is old, and you're having trouble with the Sefer Torah. Every few weeks, you're having a problem with the Baal Korah stops and says that he sees something that's a psul in the Sefer Torah. So now you want to sell the Sefer Torah in order to purchase another Sefer Torah, but you're doing it because you want to improve. You want to get a better Sefer Torah. If I have a shul and Chazi Beit Tiyua, there's a problem with the shul. The tzibur doesn't fit. So I want to sell the shul lechatchila and use the money for another shul. So I'm using it on the same level. In that case, you can do that. Or let's say a shul that's too small, then everybody would agree, even lechatchila, that it's mutter lemachroi to sell it kedei likach to purchase another one. Kasav Taz, the Taz writes, Bizmanenu, nowadays, anu royin harbe mochrim sfarim, a lot of people sell Sifrei Kedusha, which I assume he means over here either Sifrei Torah, or let's say Nevi'im that are written on Klaf, or let's say the Chumoshim that the Mechaber was talking about. So Bizmanenu anu royin harbe mochrim sfarim, v'lo yichenachem b'dmeim, and they buy all the Sfarim with the same money. Nira, the Chavetz Chaim says, Nira, it seems, the akshav that nowadays, mitchilik yishakaina ha-sefer, hayadaita lekach, when the sefer was originally purchased, it's almost as if it was purchased al tanai. That mitchilik yishakaina ha-sefer, hayadaita lekach, this was the intention, sheyeloi kolzman sheyitztarach loi, that they'll have it as long as they need it, ubeim yizdamed lo yoyse yafeh, but if they find something nicer, Yim Karzel, they'll sell this one, V'yikach hayofen, and they'll buy the nicer one. V'afshlo yista beferish, even though they never made it tonight beferish. Vel Yerabba Kasav, Yerabba writes a different rationale why this is mutter. The Tama Miniku Mishum, the Saimach and Amasha Kasav Sif Yud, they're being Saimach on something that we're going to learn later in Sif Yud. The Yachid al Sefer Torah Shaloi Mutter Limkar. That all of these halachas really apply to a Sefer Torah or a Davar Shebekdusha that belongs to the tzibur. But a private one, you could sell, and you could use the money for the same level of Kedusha. But if it would belong to the tzibur in a chidami, it would be aser. V'ayin sham b'Mishnah Berurah. Okay, Sif Hey, 2 lines on the bottom here on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. Very interesting Sif, very often negei lahalacha. Says the Mechaber, Im gavu ma'ois livnois beis hakneses oy beis hamedrash. If a tzibur held a fundraising campaign and they raised money in order to build a beis hakneses or a beis hamedrash, oy liknois teva, or maybe they had a fundraising campaign in order to purchase a new Aron Kodesh, oy mitpachas, or a new mantle for a Sefer Torah, or Sefer Torah, or a Sefer Torah itself. So there was a fundraising campaign in order to raise money to buy a Davar Shebekdusha. V'rotzu l'shanoisai milutzorech mashagavoisam. Now the Gaboim want to go ahead and they want to make a change. Instead of using the funds for the purpose that they were raised for, they want to switch it for something else. So, for example, maybe they made a fundraising campaign for a Sefer Torah. When they started the campaign, they thought that a Sefer Torah cost $40,000. Now they started the fundraising campaign. Money is coming in. $25,000 already came in. But now somebody enlightened them and told them that nowadays, if you want to purchase a Sefer Torah, it's going to cost you $65,000. And they don't think they're going to reach $65,000. So now suddenly they want to change the campaign and they want to use the money, instead of using it to buy a Sefer Torah, they want to use it, let's say, to purchase a Yeshaya and a Yirmiyah and a Trei Osar on Klaf to be able to lay in the Haftarahs from the Klaf. So they raised the money for the Sefer Torah, but now they want to use it for Nevi'im. So is that a problem? So says the Mechaber here, Im gavu ma'is livdois beis hakneses oy beis hamedrash, if money was raised to build a shul or a beis medrash, oy liknois teva, or to purchase a new Aron Kodesh, oy mitpachas, or a mantle, oy Sefer Torah, or a Sefer Torah, or any other Davar Shebekdusha, v'ratzu l'shanoisai milutzarech mashagavu oisam, and now they want to divert the money and use the money for other purposes. Says the Mechaber, Ein mishanin, you're not allowed to divert that money and use it for something else, ela mikedusha kala lechamura. you're only allowed to go up. So you raised money for a Sefer Torah. There's no going up from a Sefer Torah. So you got to use it for a Sefer Torah. You raised money to build a shul, and now maybe you see that we're not going to get close to the amount of money that we need to build a shul. So now I want to divert that money and I want to use it for something else. Okay, you could go and you could use that money to refurbish the Aron Kodesh, to build a new Aron Kodesh, because that's going a level up. But you cannot raise money, let's say for a Sefer Torah, and then go ahead and divert that money and say, all right, we didn't get enough money for a Sefer Torah, so we're going to use the money to buy, to buy Svarim to outfit the Yotzei Svarim. We're going to buy a Shas, and we're going to buy an Art Scroll Shas, and a Mesifta Shas, and a Shulchan Aruch, and a Torah. Can't do that, because now you're diverting the money to a different tzarech, and you're going down. You're only allowed to go up. You're not allowed to go down. So, ein mishanin ela mikdusha kala lechamura. Aval, however, there's a very important caveat to this halacha, and that is, says the Mechaber, im asu bahem adavar shegavu oisam b'shvilai. Let's tweak the case a little bit. Let's say they did a fundraising campaign for a Sefer Torah, and guess what? They raised $180,000. And they don't need $180,000 for the Sefer Torah. So now somebody comes along and says, you know what? We'll buy a gorgeous Sefer Torah. We'll buy a $100,000 Sefer Torah. So now we accomplished the goal of the fundraising campaign. We bought the Sefer Torah. And we have $80,000 extra. In that case, says the Mechaber, im asu be'em hadavar shegavu oisam b'shvilai, if you accomplished the purpose of the fundraising campaign and you have extra money, mishanin hamoiser l'chol ma sheyirtzu, then you could take that money and you could divert it to anything else, even if you're going down in Kedusha. So again, the first halacha over here in Sif Hey was, you made a fundraising campaign, and now you want to divert the money and you want to use it for something else. You're only allowed to use it for something that's on a higher level of Kedusha. You're not allowed to use it for something that's on a lower level of Kedusha. The second halacha over here in Sif Hey is a major exception to that rule. And that is, if you accomplished the goal of the fundraising campaign, and now you have extra money, that extra money you could use for whatever you want. Over there, you don't have to level up. You can even level down with the rest of the money. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah, back on Lamed Hey and Aleph. Mishnah Berurah is cutting Yud Beis. Oy Sefer Torah. Now, the Chavetz Chaim is bothered right away by a kasha. Because again, what is the first halacha over here in Sif Hey? The first halacha is, you made a fundraising campaign for something, and now you want to divert the money. You could level up, but you can't level down. One of the examples that the Mechaber gave was, you made a fundraising campaign to purchase a Sefer Torah. Now, by a Sefer Torah, it's impossible to level up. There is no higher level of Kedusha than a Sefer Torah. So the Chavetz Chaim is bothered right away. Why did the Mechaber list Sefer Torah as one of the Dvarim Shebekdusha that were purchased in order to illustrate this halacha? It seems to me that this halacha is not really negayah to the Sefer Torah, because by the Sefer Torah you can't possibly level up. So the Mishnah Berurah is going to give two tirutzim. The first one is the more obvious teretz. It says the Mishnah Berurah, Oy Sefer Torah, Amad de Messiahim ein Mishanin Koi. The reason the Mechaber is listing Sefer Torah is because part of this halacha is that you're not allowed to divert the money for something of a lesser Kedusha. And there certainly are a lot of things of a lesser Kedusha than a Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah is the epitome. So the halacha is negayah to a Sefer Torah to tell you that if you raised money for a Sefer Torah, you're not allowed to use it for a bima. You're not allowed to use it for an Aron Kodesh, because that would be a step down. Now, in a Chinami, it's not negayah to step up, because you can't. But the bottom line is, if you made a fundraising campaign for a Sefer Torah, the funds have to be used for a Sefer Torah. They can't be used for anything else. Or you could say, the Nakte Lash Be'inon, that the Mechaber mentioned Sefer Torah to tell me a Chiddush. And that is, there is one case where you're allowed to divert the money, let's say, that was raised for a Sefer Torah for something else. And that is if you have to feed Talmidei Chachamim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, "Oy denakte lashbi'inon de mishanin oisoi lahaspakas talmidim." That you, even money that you raised for a Sefer Torah, you're allowed to divert to support Talmidei Chachamim. Ukidul kamei b'sivav. Ois kan yud gimel ein mishanin. You're not allowed to use that money for anything of a lesser kedusha. You're only allowed to level up. Says the Mechaber, v'im roitzim hakabam lil voisan. Let's say the kaboim, they raised $50,000 for a Sefer Torah. Now there's somebody who's making 2 chasanas and who needs a loan. So the kaboim want to give a loan. They want to lend out that money. And then they want to replace the money. So they have $50,000 that they raised for the Sefer Torah. They want to lend out those 50 and then use another 50 for the original purpose of buying the Sefer Torah. So the Mishnah Berurah brings down a machlokes hapaiskim. La Magen Avram Aser. The Magen Avram holds that this is Aser. The habaylim nichaluhu lemevad hamitzvah b'mamayin zedafka. Because the Magen Avram says the nadvanim, the people who gave the money, they want to know that their money was used to purchase the Sefer Torah. They don't want that their money should be given out to lend, and then other monies should be used to buy the Sefer Torah. Well, the Taz, Shari, but according to the Taz, this would be mutter. Ach, al yidei shiva tuvei ha'ir, when it comes to the shiva tuvei ha'ir that we'll discuss in a later shir, this is kind of like the board of the shul. Al yidei shiva tuvei ha'ir, you have the committee that's in charge of these things for the tzibur. B'maimed anshe ha'ir, if they make a decision in the presence of the general membership, in the presence of the townspeople, then you're allowed to divert the monies. The second halacha here in Sif Hey, the Mechaber said, was if you raised the money and you accomplished the goal of the fundraising campaign, and now you have extra money. With the extra money, the Mechaber said you could use it l'chol masha yirtzu. Says the Mishnah Berurah cutting yodal l'chol masha yirtzu. Hainu afilu davar shein by kedusha klal. You raised $180,000 for a Sefer Torah. You used $100,000 to buy a Sefer Torah. You accomplished the goal of the fundraising campaign. You have $80,000 left. The Mechaber said you could use it l'chol masha yirtzu. Says the Chavetz Chaim, hainu afilu davar shein by kedusha klal. You could use it to purchase things that don't have Kedusha. You don't even have to buy other Dvarim Shebekdusha, like an Erev Kodesh or a Bima or a Mantel or a Gartel. Elashu Tzarchei Tzibur. You could use it for any Tzarchei Tzibur. So if the Tzibur needs to pay somebody to repair the Erev, you could use it to repair the Erev. You want to use it for Bika Chaylim, you could use it for Bika Chaylim. You want to use it for Hatzalah, you could use it for Hatzalah. Even though the money is going to be spent on things that are not Dvarim Shebekdusha, doesn't matter. Since the goal of the fundraising campaign was accomplished, the rest of the money is available for any Tzarchei Tzibur. Vatam, Kevin Chanasa Das Anshe Bahamois, since the goal of the fundraising campaign was fulfilled, the goal that the townspeople wanted to accomplish was accomplished. Now you're allowed to do anything else, Tzarchei Tzibur, with the leftover money. Okay, now we have a very, very interesting, a little bit of a complicated case that the Mechaber is going to talk about, but we just have to just quickly recap what we just said. What the Mechaber just said was, halacha number 1, you made a fundraising campaign. The funds that you raised have to be used either for what you raised them for or for something that's a level up in Kedusha. But you cannot raise money for a Davar Shebekdusha and then divert that money and use it for something of lesser Kedusha. That was halacha number 1. Halacha number 2 gave a major exception. And that is if you did a fundraising campaign and you accomplished the goal of the fundraising campaign, now not only are you allowed to level down, but you could level down to the extent that you don't even have to use it for a Davar Shebekdusha. So like the case that I gave, you made a fundraising campaign to purchase a Sefer Torah. You raised $180,000. You used $100 for a Sefer Torah. So you got the Sefer Torah. Now the rest of the money could be used even for things that are not Dvarim Shebekdusha at all. Very, very major chiddush. We have money over here that was raised, it was donated for the purpose, let's say, of buying a Sefer Torah, or for the purpose of doing a remodeling campaign and building a new Aron Kodesh. You're even allowed to use that money to fix the Erev, for Bika Chaylim, for other Tzarchei Tzibur. Why? As long as you accomplished the goal of the fundraising campaign. The people were giving money in order to get a new Sefer Torah. They got a new Sefer Torah. There's leftover money. The leftover money you could use for other things. Now, I want to show you that is in tremendous distinction to the halacha that we learned yesterday in Sif Beis. Yesterday in Sif Beis we learned, let's say you went ahead and you sold a shul, right? So you have shul money. We said that the proceeds of that sale, you could elevate them in Kedusha, so you could buy a bima, an Aron Kodesh, but you can't go down. Now, over there, you can't go down with any of the money. You can't, let's say, sell a shul for $500,000 and then go ahead and level up with $100,000, buy a Sefer Torah with $100,000, level up with another 100 and do a new bima and a new Aron Kodesh, and then take the other 300 and fix the Erev and give it to Bika Chaylim and buy a Hatzalah ambulance. No, you can't do that. Every penny of the sale of the shul must be used for a higher Kedusha. Over here, when you made a fundraising campaign, since you accomplished the goal of the fundraising campaign, the extra money is usable for anything, even if it's not a Davar Shebekdusha. That's one point that I want to make. Another point I want to make is that there's no mention here of a Tanai. You didn't have to make a Tanai in order to do this. You didn't have to put the fine print on the bottom of the fundraising campaign and say, if there's extra money after we purchase the Sefer Torah, we're going to use it for other things. No, you don't need a Tanai. As long as you accomplish the goal of the fundraising event, the extra money you can do whatever you want with. Now let's see another case, which is going to be a little bit complicated, but I'll speak it out outside first. Now the case of the Mechaber is going to be like this. Let's say you went ahead and you made a fundraising campaign to buy a Sefer Torah, and you raised $100,000. You took the $100,000 and you bought a Sefer Torah. No problem. Very straightforward. The money was given for a Sefer Torah, and it was used to buy a Sefer Torah. All right. Now the Sefer Torah is being used for 6 months, and the Baal Koreh turns around and the Baal Koreh says, I'm not so happy with the Sefer Torah. I don't like the Ksav. There's something about this Ksav that, I don't know, every Shabbos I lane, and I look at it and I'm thinking that I'm seeing mistakes. I don't know. The Vav is very thin on the bottom. Some of them look like Yudin. I'm not happy with the Sefer Torah. All right. Listen, they have a Baal Koreh. They want the Baal Koreh to be happy. So the Gaboim decide to go ahead and sell the Sefer Torah. They sell the Sefer Torah. All right. They paid $100,000 for it. They sell it. They get the $100,000 back. Now they take the $100,000 and they go to buy a new Sefer Torah. They go to buy another Sefer Torah, and this time they're smart. They take the Baal Koreh with them. The Baal Koreh goes to the Sefer. He looks at the different Sifrei Torah, and he picks out one that cost $80,000. So now they buy a Sefer Torah for $80,000. Oh, now there's $20,000 left. What's the din of those $20,000? Now, what's the difference between this case and the previous case? The difference is that in the previous case, you made a fundraising campaign for a Sefer Torah and you raised $100,000. You went to buy the Sefer Torah, it cost you $80,000. It's all right. The Mechaber said you accomplished the goal of the fundraising. You bought a Sefer Torah. There's $20,000 extra. You can do it to $20,000, whatever you want. In the new case, you made a fundraising campaign for a Sefer Torah. You raised $100,000. You used it all for a Sefer Torah. You didn't use 80. You used all 100. And you bought a Sefer Torah with all 100. Then you sold the Sefer Torah for 100, and you got 100 back. You made that whole $100,000 Sefer Torah money. Now you went out and you bought a new Sefer Torah for 80, and you have 20 left. You can't take that 20 necessarily and do whatever you want, because that 20 is already Sefer Torah money. That's why this case is different than the previous case. Now, what the Mechaber is going to say is, in this case, it depends if you made it Tanai. And let's see when you had to make the Tanai. Let's look now at the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber, near the end of the top line, Lamed Hayom Beis. Im kishegavu hamois, if when you made the fundraising campaign, hisdu lasais chetza mimaiser adamim, you made it Tanai all the way up front. We're going to raise money for a Sefer Torah, but if there's extra money, we're going to do with it whatever we want. If you made that Tanai, right? So im kishegavu hamois, hisdu lasais chetza mimaiser adamim, you made it Tanai up front, that if there's leftover money, you're going to do whatever you want with it. Then says the Mechaber, afilu kanu, even if they bought, let's say, a Sefer Torah with all the money, umachru, and then they sold it, v'chazru v'kanu, and then they bought a new one, v'chazru v'kanu kedusha, they bought another davar shebekdusha, b'miktsas hadamim, with only some of the money. So they raised $100,000. Let's use an Aron Kodesh, for example. They raised $100,000. They bought an Aron Kodesh for $100,000. The tzibur didn't like the Aron Kodesh, so they sold the Aron Kodesh for $100,000. Now they made a new Aron Kodesh for 80, and they have 20 left. Mutter lahayrid hamaiser. Now you could demote the $20,000 that are extra, and you could do whatever you want with them. If you made it Tanai all the way up front when you raised the original 100,000. Avalim lo yehistu kishegavu, but if you did not make that Tanai when you originally raised the money, ela kishemachru hisnu, when you raised the $100,000 for the Aron Kodesh, you didn't make it Tanai. You took in the 100,000, you built an Aron Kodesh. Now the tzibur doesn't like it, you sold it. But now you said to yourself, oh, when we sell it, we're going to make it Tanai. We're making it Tanai now when we sell the Aron Kodesh, that if we have extra money, we're going to use it for whatever we want. Avalim lo yistu kishegavu, but you didn't make the Tanai all the way up front when you made the fundraising campaign. Ela kishemachru hisnu, you made the Tanai when you sold it, asur lo hiridam. Then the extra money is already Aron Kodesh money, and you could only use it for something either on a higher level of kedusha, or depending on the machlokes in Sif Daled, maybe on the same level as an Aron Kodesh. Very interesting case and a very fascinating halacha. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Ois Katan Tezvav. If you made it Tanai all the way up front when you made the fundraising campaign, so then afilu kanu umachru, even if you bought an Aron Kodesh and then sold it, and now you have extra money, you fundraised for the Aron Kodesh, you made the Aron Kodesh, you sold the Aron Kodesh, you bought a new Aron Kodesh, and now you have extra money. El Yerabah v'Agra mefakfikin bazeh. The El Yerabah and the Gra take issue with the Mechaber. They don't agree with the Mechaber. And they say, the Efshir shekevu cha'achakach kanu stam mikol adamim, since you used the whole 100,000 to purchase the original Aron Kodesh, chayla hakdusha b'chal hakniyah. So the whole $100,000 became Aron Kodesh money. I don't care that you made it Tanai up front when you made the fundraising campaign. The bottom line is you raised $100,000 and you used the full 100 to buy an Aron Kodesh. By using the full 100 to buy an Aron Kodesh, it all became Aron Kodesh money. Now you sold the Aron Kodesh, you got 100 back, it's all Aron Kodesh money. You made a new Aron Kodesh for 80, you have 20 left. I'm sorry, it's Aron Kodesh money. You want to use it to build a new bima? Use it to build a new bima. but you can't demote that money and use it to buy a Shas and a Shulchan Aruch and a Torah and Svarim Shranken. V'asakach kishamachru v'yisiru. Ois kan tazayin avalim loy hisnu. But if you didn't make it tonight at the original fundraising campaign, then everybody agrees you cannot demote the money. Hatam does kishakanu chalak dusha b'ashakanu. Ve'ena mo'elach hakach tonight beis hamechira. Okay, says the Ramah, 3 lines down near the end of the line. Hagah. Ve'imkanu b'damim elu shagavu eitzim va'avanim. Let's say they made a fundraising campaign to build a shul, and they went ahead and they purchased lumber and bricks with the money. Chala kedushas hadamim al ha'eitzim va'avanim. The kedusha of the money that was raised goes on to the materials that were purchased. Va'asal l'shanoisan rak l'kedusha chamura. And now you can't go ahead if this wood and stones were given to build a Beis HaKnesses. You can't go ahead now and use them for a lesser, more mundane function. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Yud Zayin, Chala Kedushas Hadabim, Lahamagid Avram Shekasav Deleil B'Sif Katan Yud Gimel, also Lil Vaisan Lili Tenacherem Tachton. You won't even be allowed to lend out this money. Ois Katan Yud Ches, also L'Shanaisan, you're not allowed to change this money only to something that's more chomer. V'afagav Debuchach L'Kamei B'Sif Ches, Ta'afilu Ibanu L'Shem Beis HaKnesses B'Ina Davka She'espal Lubai. See, the Chavetz Chaim has a problem over here now. This is a major, major problem with this whole sugya that's talked about at length in the Achronim, and that is, why are you not allowed to go ahead and lessen the kedusha, even when you go ahead and build a shul? You build a building for a shul. It's not invested with kedushas Beis HaKnesses until you actually daven in it. Why? Because hazmana lav milsa. We paskin that hazmana, just preparing it l'shem Beis HaKnesses, does not invest it with kedushas Beis HaKnesses. It doesn't become a Beis HaKnesses until you daven in it. And yet we're saying that you raised money for a shul and you bought lumber and bricks. Now the lumber and bricks become invested in kedusha, and somebody can't take a 2x4 and use it to remodel his kitchen? Why? How did it get invested with Kedushas Beis HaKnesses? That's the problem that the Mishnah Berurah is dealing with over here in Ois Katan Yud Ches. Even if you build lumber into the construction of a shul, it doesn't become invested with Kedusha until you daven in the shul. But as long as you don't daven in the shul, you could still change it into something else. So how is it over here that because we raised money and we went ahead and we purchased lumber and bricks, somehow they get Kedusha? Says the Chavetz Chaim, over there when we said that the Beis HaKnesses is not invested with Kedusha until you daven in it, that's when the Beis HaKnesses was not built based on money, using money that was donated and collected l'shem Beis HaKnesses. Rather, they used it al yidei gvias mois hasamar shaloi nasa Beis HaKnesses al yidei gvias mois shegavlu tzarchamim now here elo shekenu hakol mimon chulin shegavlu stam. They had chulin money. I don't know. They had money. People came and they donated money for the tzibur, but it wasn't collected and raised for a Beis HaKnesses. Oh, we're talking about a small town. People came, they dropped off wood, they dropped off bricks. Ubanu Beis HaKnesses, and then the people went and built the Beis HaKnesses. In that case, nothing gets Kedushas Beis HaKnesses until you actually daven in it. But when you raise money from the tzibur l'shem Beis HaKnesses, v'adai da'asal l'shanasai afilu adayin lo yispalu sham klum, then it's invested with Kedusha even before you daven there. If there's still money extant that was collected for these purposes. Some people say that a distinction over here is because the money already came to the Gabbai for that usage. Once you collect money from the tzibur to use for a Beis HaKnesses, it's a bezoyan ha-mitzvah if you go ahead and now demote that money and use it for something else. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time. Mitzvah Hashem with Ice Cut and your test. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be Megan and God's Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua's refuahs parnasset sheduchim to those in need. We should be zeicher to see the B'yas Kol Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.